The red and blue lights painted the quiet street in sharp colors. What had been a peaceful evening now felt tense and heavy. Marcus stood still on his own lawn, his hands open and visible. His training had taught him to stay calm in moments like this. His heart beat hard, but his face showed control. Across the street, Mrs. Carter slowly lowered her phone. She had made the call only 5 minutes earlier. At that time, she felt certain. Now, watching the scene unfold, she felt unsure. The officer holding Marcus's ID card looked at it carefully. He read the name again. Marcus Hill, United States Army, 12 years of service. The officer's posture changed. His shoulders relaxed slightly. "You just returned today?" the officer asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied. "This afternoon." The second officer looked at the house behind Marcus. It did not look broken into. The windows were fine. The door was unlocked, not forced. "Is this property in your name?" the officer asked. "Yes, sir. I bought it years ago." Marcus kept his voice steady. He had answered questions like this before, but never in his own neighborhood. The first officer gave the ID back. "Thank you for your service," he said quietly. The words were respectful, honest, but something inside Marcus still felt heavy. "Everything okay, officers?" Marcus asked calmly. The officers exchanged a look. "We received a call from a neighbor reporting suspicious activity," one officer explained. "She believed someone was entering an empty house." Marcus slowly nodded. "I understand," he said, but his eyes showed hurt. Across the street, Mrs. Carter could not hear every word, but she saw the officers hand the ID back. She saw one of them shake Marcus's hand. Her stomach tightened. The officers walked toward her house. Mrs. Carter opened the door before they knocked. "Ma'am," the officer began politely, "the man across the street owns that home. He is a veteran who just returned from deployment." The words felt louder than the sirens had been. "Oh," she whispered. I didn't know." The officer nodded gently. "In the future, it may help to speak with your neighbor first, if it's safe to do so," he said. Mrs. Carter forced a small smile. "Yes, of course." But when the officers left, the silence became uncomfortable. She slowly stepped outside onto her porch. Marcus was still standing in his yard. The police cars were gone now. The street looked normal again. But nothing felt normal. For a moment, their eyes met. Marcus did not glare. He did not shout. He simply looked at her, tired, calm, and distant. Then he picked up his duffel bag and walked inside. Mrs. Carter's chest felt tight. She told herself she had only been protecting the neighborhood. She told herself she could not have known. But deep down, she remembered something. When she made the call, she did not say, "I'm not sure." She did not say, "Maybe I'm mistaken." She said, "There's a suspicious man breaking into the house." She had sounded certain. Now that certainty felt embarrassing. Inside his home, Marcus sat down on the old couch, still covered in a white sheet. He ran his hands over his face slowly. He had faced danger overseas. He had been welcomed by strangers in other countries who thanked him for helping their villages. But here, on his first night home, he had been treated like a criminal. The pain was not loud. It was quiet. It was the kind of pain that sits in your chest and does not move. Marcus stood up and walked to the kitchen window. He looked out at Maple Street. Children were riding bikes again. A man walked his dog. Life had returned to normal, except for him. He wondered if this would always happen, if he would always have to prove he belonged. Across the street, Mrs. Carter closed her curtains. She did not want to look outside anymore. But the image of Marcus standing under flashing lights would not leave her mind. She remembered her father's old military medals, still stored in a small wooden box upstairs. She remembered how proud she had been when he told stories of serving. If someone had called the police on her father, how would she have felt? That thought made her sit down heavily in her chair. "I made a mistake," she whispered to herself. But it was too late to take back the call. The street was quiet again. Yet something had changed. Marcus lay down that night on his childhood bed. He stared at the ceiling in the dark. Home was supposed to feel safe. Instead, it felt uncertain. And across Maple Street, a woman who believed she was protecting her neighborhood slowly began to understand that fear can make good people do hurtful things. Neither of them slept well that night, because sometimes the hardest battles are not fought overseas. Sometimes they begin right at your own front door. Marcus Hill stepped off the bus just as the sun was going down. The sky was orange and purple, soft and quiet, like the world was holding its breath. He stood still for a moment and looked around. The air felt different here, cleaner, safer. This was home. He carried only one duffel bag over his shoulder. It was old and faded, just like the one he carried when he first left 12 years ago. Back then, he was young and full of big dreams. Now he was older, stronger, quieter. His boots touched the sidewalk slowly as he walked down Maple Street. The houses stood in neat rows, with small gardens and white fences. Children's bikes were left near driveways. Wind chimes made soft sounds in the evening breeze. Everything looked peaceful, but Marcus felt nervous. He had been away for many years serving in the military. He had seen places filled with dust, noise, and fear. He had heard loud explosions and cries in the dark. He had learned to stay alert at all times. Even now, walking on a calm street, his eyes moved carefully. His body was still trained to expect danger. He stopped in front of a small blue house with white windows. The paint was a little old, but the porch light was still there, just like he remembered. This house meant everything to him. He had bought it years ago for his mother before he was deployed overseas. She had passed away while he was still serving. He was not able to come back for her funeral. That pain still lived inside him. Now he was finally back. Marcus took a deep breath and pulled a small key from his pocket. His hands were steady, but his heart was heavy. He unlocked the door and pushed it open slowly. The house smelled empty, quiet, still. Dust floated in the air where the sunlight touched the floor. The furniture was covered with white sheets. On the wall near the kitchen door, a photo frame still hung in its place. Marcus walked toward it. It was a picture of him and his mother on the day he left for training. She was smiling proudly, holding his arm. He was wearing his uniform for the first time. He reached out and gently touched the frame. "I'm home, Mom," he whispered. Outside, a curtain moved in the house across the street. Mrs. Eleanor Carter had lived on Maple Street for 20 years. She noticed everything that happened on her street. She believed it was her duty to keep the neighborhood safe. When she saw the tall man with a duffel bag enter the empty house, her body became tense. She did not recognize him. She watched him from behind her window. Her mind began to create questions. Why was he there? Who was he? Why did he look so serious? Instead of walking outside to ask, she stayed inside. Marcus placed his bag on the floor and removed his jacket. He walked slowly through each room. The bedroom, the kitchen, the small living room. Each space held memories. He remembered his mother cooking dinner while music played softly. He remembered sitting at the small wooden table, laughing with her. He remembered promising her that he would return safely. He had kept his promise. But now the house felt too quiet. Marcus walked back outside to bring in another small box from the porch. That was when he noticed flashing red and blue lights reflecting off the windows. He froze. 2 police cars stopped in front of the house. His training came back instantly. His shoulders straightened. His hands stayed visible. His breathing slowed. 2 officers stepped out of the cars. "Sir," one of them called out calmly, "can you step away from the door?" Marcus did not argue. He slowly stepped forward onto the lawn. "Yes, officer," he replied in a steady voice. Across the street, Mrs. Carter watched closely. Her hands were shaking slightly, but she told herself she had done the right thing. The officer approached Marcus carefully. "We received a call about a possible break-in," the officer said. "Can you tell us what you're doing here?" Marcus looked at the house behind him. "This is my home," he said quietly. "I just returned today." The officer studied his face. "Do you have identification?" Marcus nodded slowly and reached into his pocket. He moved carefully so there would be no misunderstanding. He handed over his military ID. The officer looked down at the card. His expression changed. His eyes moved from the ID back to Marcus. The street was silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. And in that moment, Marcus understood something painful. He had fought for his country. He had risked his life many times. But on his very first night home, someone had looked at him and seen a threat instead of a neighbor. The flashing lights reflected in his eyes. And Maple Street would never forget what happened next. The next morning, Maple Street looked bright and peaceful. The sun was warm. Birds sang from the trees. Sprinklers sprayed water across green lawns. From the outside, everything looked normal. But inside the blue house, Marcus was already awake. He had barely slept. Every small sound during the night had made him open his eyes. Car passing, a dog barking, a door closing somewhere down the street. His body was still trained for danger. He sat on the edge of his bed and looked at the small box on the floor. Inside were his medals, neatly placed in soft cloth. He had earned each one with hard work and sacrifice. But he did not feel proud this morning. He felt tired. After a long shower, Marcus decided he would not hide inside. This was his home. He would act like it. He stepped outside and began cleaning the front yard. The grass had grown tall. Leaves were scattered across the walkway. He worked quietly, focused on the simple task. Across the street, Mrs. Carter watched from behind her curtain again. But this time something was different. She did not feel fear. She felt shame. She saw Marcus bending down to pick up trash near the sidewalk. She saw him carefully fixing a loose board on the porch railing. He did not look like a threat. He looked like a man trying to rebuild his life. Her phone buzzed suddenly. It was a message from another neighbor. "Who is the new guy across from you?" The message read. Mrs. Carter stared at the screen. For a moment, she thought about typing, "I'm not sure." But then she remembered what the officer had said. He is a veteran who just returned from deployment. She slowly typed back. His name is Marcus. He served in the army for 12 years. She paused. Then she added, "He owns the house." It was the first time she had written his name. Later that morning, something unexpected happened. A car stopped in front of Marcus's house. A young delivery driver stepped out with a medium-sized package. Marcus walked toward him. "Marcus Hill?" the driver asked. "Yes," Marcus answered. "Welcome home," the driver said with a small smile. "My brother serves too." Marcus nodded. "Thank you." Mrs. Carter heard those words from her porch. "Welcome home." The phrase echoed in her mind. Had anyone said that to him yesterday? Or had the first thing he seen been flashing police lights? Suddenly, Mrs. Carter made a decision. She walked inside and went upstairs. In her closet was an old wooden box covered in dust. She opened it carefully. Inside were her father's medals and a folded American flag. She picked up one medal and held it in her hand. Her father used to tell her, "Respect the uniform, but respect the person inside it even more." Tears filled her eyes. Down the street, another neighbor, Mr. Jenkins, was walking his dog when he noticed Marcus working. "Morning," Mr. Jenkins called out. Marcus looked up, surprised for a second. "Morning," he replied. "You just moved in?" Mr. Jenkins asked. "Just came back," Marcus said. "Been away a while." Mr. Jenkins nodded. "Well, welcome to the neighborhood." It was simple. 2 words. But they meant more than Mr. Jenkins knew. Marcus gave a small smile. "Thank you." From her window, Mrs. Carter saw the exchange. She realized something important. Marcus had not changed. The street had. It only took one person to start a chain of fear. But it could also take one person to start a chain of kindness. Later that afternoon, a black SUV pulled up near the blue house. A man in uniform stepped out. Mrs. Carter felt nervous again, but not for the same reason as before. The man in uniform walked straight toward Marcus and gave him a firm handshake. They spoke for several minutes. Then, without warning, the man saluted Marcus. Saluted him. Mrs. Carter's breath caught. The message was clear. This was not just a regular man. This was someone who had led others. Someone respected. The uniformed man left shortly after. Marcus stood alone again in his yard. But this time he did not look isolated. He looked strong. That evening, Mrs. Carter sat at her kitchen table thinking deeply. The truth had come out. Not through shouting. Not through anger. Through small actions. Through quiet dignity. Marcus had not defended himself loudly. He had not demanded apologies. He simply lived his truth. And that truth was more powerful than any fear. As the sun began to set again over Maple Street, Mrs. Carter stood up from her chair. She knew something now. The police had left. The street had returned to normal. But the real change needed to happen inside her. And she knew she could not ignore it any longer. Because once the truth becomes clear, you cannot pretend you did not see it. And tomorrow she would have to face him, not as a stranger across the street, but as her neighbor. The next day felt heavier than the others. Not because something loud happened, but because something quiet was growing. Mrs. Carter woke up earlier than usual. She stood by her bedroom window and looked across the street at the blue house. Marcus was outside again. He was painting the porch railing now. Slow, careful strokes. He did not rush. He did not look around to see who was watching. He simply worked. The police lights were gone. The tension from 2 nights ago was gone. But the memory was not. Mrs. Carter stepped away from the window and walked to the kitchen. She made coffee, but it tasted bitter. She sat at the table, staring at nothing. She had told herself she was protecting the neighborhood. But the truth felt different now. The truth felt uncomfortable. Later that morning, she heard voices outside. She looked through the blinds and saw something that made her heart drop. 2 neighborhood women were standing near the sidewalk, talking quietly. They kept glancing at Marcus. One of them laughed softly. Mrs. Carter could not hear the words, but she knew what they were talking about. The police, the call, the suspicious man. And suddenly, something else hit her. They knew. The officers had spoken to her in front of the street. People had seen. Her mistake was not private. It was public. A deep embarrassment washed over her. She had always been seen as the responsible one, the careful one, the person who kept the street safe. Now she felt small. Across the road, Marcus paused his painting and noticed the 2 women staring. He gave them a polite nod. They quickly looked away. Marcus felt it. The distance. The whispers. He had experienced it before in different places, but it hurt more here. This was not a foreign country. This was home. He placed the paintbrush down and sat on the porch steps for a moment. He looked at the quiet street. He did not want to feel angry, but he felt tired. He wondered if the call would always be remembered. If he would always be that guy the police came for. Inside her home, Mrs. Carter made a decision. Running from embarrassment would not fix it. She had to face it. She walked to the kitchen and opened her refrigerator. She took out flour, eggs, and sugar. Her hands shook slightly as she began mixing ingredients in a bowl. Baking was the only way she knew how to calm her mind. As she worked, memories of her father filled her thoughts. She remembered the way neighbors welcomed him home after his service. She remembered how proud she felt standing beside him. And now she had done the opposite to someone else's child. Someone else's hero. Tears formed in her eyes, but she kept mixing. Outside, Marcus stood up and continued painting. A small boy riding his bike slowed down near the blue house. "Are you new here?" the boy asked. Marcus smiled gently. "I grew up here. Just came back." The boy looked impressed. "Cool." He rode off quickly. That one small word made Marcus smile for the first time that day. Inside her house, Mrs. Carter placed a pie into the oven. The smell slowly filled the room. She looked out the window again. Marcus was now fixing a loose mailbox post. He looked focused, calm, not dangerous, not threatening, just a man rebuilding his space. Mrs. Carter's chest tightened. Embarrassment slowly changed into something else. Regret. She imagined how he must have felt standing in front of the officers. Alone. Questioned. In front of everyone. She imagined if it had been her father instead. The thought made her close her eyes. When the pie was ready, She carefully placed it in a small dish. Her heart beat fast. This felt harder than making the call. Walking across the street felt heavier than dialing the phone. But she stepped outside anyway. The afternoon sun was warm. Each step toward the blue house felt like a test. Marcus looked up as he heard footsteps. He saw Mrs. Carter walking toward him. For a moment, silence filled the space between them. She stopped a few feet away. Her hands held the pie tightly. I owe you an apology," she said softly. Marcus did not speak immediately. He studied her face. He could see it now. Not fear. Not suspicion. Shame. "I made a mistake," she continued. "I should have come over and introduced myself instead of calling the police." The words were simple, but they were honest. Marcus looked down for a moment, then back at her. "It wasn't easy," he said quietly. She nodded. "I know." There were no loud speeches, no dramatic music, just two people standing in the sunlight, facing an uncomfortable truth. "I hope we can start over," she said gently. Marcus looked at the pie, then back at her. "We can try," he answered. It was not full forgiveness, but it was a beginning. As Mrs. Carter walked back to her house, her embarrassment did not disappear, but it changed. It became a lesson. Across the street, Marcus Pick. A week passed. Maple Street looked normal again. Cars moved in and out of driveways. Children laughed in the afternoon. The mailman walked his usual path. But something deeper was changing. Marcus had started waking up early each morning. He would jog slowly around the block, then sit on his porch with a cup of coffee. He liked the quiet hours before the street became busy. One morning, as he sat there, he noticed Mrs. Carter walking toward him. Not quickly, not nervously, but with purpose. She was holding nothing this time. No pie, no basket, just herself. Marcus stood up politely. "Good morning," he said. "Good morning," she replied. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. The air felt calm but serious. "I was thinking," Mrs. Carter began slowly, "about what you said the other day." Marcus looked at her carefully. "What part?" "When you said you hope people will see you as a neighbor first." He nodded once. She took a deep breath. "I want to understand," she said quietly. "If you're willing to talk." Marcus studied her face. There was no fear there now. No pride. Just honesty. He gestured toward the porch chairs. "Please," he said. They both sat down. The street was quiet. "I've never served in the military," Mrs. Carter said. "My father did, but I was young when he came home. I remember he was different, quieter." Marcus looked down at his hands. "Coming home is not always easy," he said simply. "Why?" she asked softly. Marcus paused. He searched for simple words. "Over there," he began slowly, "you are always alert, always ready. You learn to react fast. You protect the person next to you. You don't question if you belong. You just do your duty." She listened carefully. "But when you come back," he continued, "people don't always understand what you've seen. Sometimes they thank you. Sometimes they avoid you. Sometimes they look at you like you don't fit." Mrs. Carter swallowed hard. "And the other night?" she asked quietly. Marcus took a slow breath. "The other night," he said, "I felt like I had to prove I deserved to stand in my own yard." His words were calm, but they carried weight. Mrs. Carter felt her eyes fill with tears. "I am sorry," she whispered again. "I know," Marcus replied gently. There was no anger in his voice, just truth. "Can I ask you something?" she said carefully. "Of course." "Why weren't you angry?" Marcus gave a small smile. "I was," he admitted, "for a moment. But anger is heavy. I carried enough of that in other places. I don't want to carry it here." His answer surprised her. Most people would have shouted. Most people would have held a grudge. Instead, he chose peace. "Do you ever feel tired?" she asked softly. Marcus nodded slowly. "Sometimes," he said. "Sometimes I feel tired of explaining, tired of proving. But I remind myself that one good conversation can change something." She looked at him carefully. "Like this one?" "Yes," he said. A small silence followed. Then something unexpected happened. Mrs. Carter laughed softly through her tears. "You know," she said, "you remind me of my father." Marcus looked surprised. "He was quiet too," she explained. "Strong, but gentle." Marcus smiled faintly. "That's a good man to be compared to." They sat there for a while longer, not talking much, just sharing space. For the first time, it did not feel forced. Later that afternoon, Mrs. Carter did something she had never done before. She invited Marcus to the small neighborhood cookout planned for the weekend. "I think people need to know you," she said. "Not rumors, not stories. You." Marcus hesitated for a second. Crowds were still difficult sometimes. But then he thought about what he had said earlier. One good conversation can change something. "I'll come," he replied. That evening, as the sun went down, Marcus felt something he had not felt since returning. Belonging. Not fully, but beginning. Across the street, Mrs. Carter watched him from her porch. Not with suspicion, not with fear, but with respect. She realized something important. Courage is not only shown on battlefields. Sometimes it is shown in quiet conversations, in listening, in admitting mistakes, in choosing to grow. And as the lights of Maple Street turned on one by one, the space between two houses no longer felt like a wall, felt like a bridge built not by police lights, not by fear, but by honesty and understanding. And sometimes that is the strongest kind of strength. That night, the street was quiet again. But inside Mrs. Carter's home, nothing felt peaceful. She sat in her living room with the lights off. The only light came from the lamp near her chair. The soft yellow glow made long shadows on the walls. She kept thinking about the look in Marcus's eyes when he said, "It wasn't easy." He did not yell. He did not accuse her. But his calm voice made the truth heavier. She leaned back in her chair and closed her eyes. The memory of the police lights came back clearly. The flashing red and blue colors against the dark sky. Marcus standing alone on his own lawn. She imagined how it must have felt for him. Coming home after 12 years. Unlocking his door. And then being treated like he did not belong. Her chest tightened. Upstairs, in the closet, the wooden box with her father's medals still sat on the shelf. She had not put it back after taking it out earlier. Slowly, she stood up and walked upstairs. She opened the box again. Inside was a folded American flag and 3 medals. She picked up the flag carefully. Her father had once told her about the first day he returned home from service. He said the hardest part was not the war. It was coming back and trying to feel normal again. "You feel like a stranger in your own town," he had said. At the time, she did not fully understand. Now she did. Across the street, Marcus was also awake. He sat at his kitchen table, looking at an old notebook. Inside were letters he had written to his mother while he was deployed. She had kept every single one. He opened one at random. "Don't worry about me, Mom," the letter read. "I'll be home soon." He smiled softly. Soon had taken 12 years. He thought about the apology earlier that day. It was sincere. He could see that. But the hurt had not disappeared. He had worked so hard to come back with honor. He had survived things most people would never see. And yet, in one moment, someone saw him as a problem. He closed the notebook slowly. He did not want anger to grow inside him. He had seen what anger could do. He had lived around it. He wanted peace. But peace takes time. The next morning, something unexpected happened. A loud noise came from down the street. Car had broken down near the corner. Smoke was coming from under the hood. A young woman stood beside it, looking worried. Her small child sat inside, crying. People looked from their windows. No one stepped out. Marcus heard the noise and walked outside. Without thinking twice, he jogged down the street. "Are you okay?" he asked the woman. "I don't know what's wrong with it," she said nervously. "And my phone battery is almost dead." Marcus looked under the hood carefully. He had learned basic mechanical skills during his service. "It's overheating," he said calmly. "Let it cool down. I'll grab some water." He ran back to his house and returned with a large bottle of water and a small toolkit. Within minutes, he helped fix the problem enough for her to drive safely to a repair shop. The woman looked relieved. "Thank you so much," she said. "I don't know what I would have done." "It's okay," Marcus replied simply. Across the street, Mrs. Carter had watched everything. She had seen how quickly he moved to help. She had seen the child stop crying. She had seen the woman smile with relief. And something inside her shifted again. The memory of the police lights now stood next to this new image. Marcus helping. Marcus calm. Marcus kind. That afternoon, Mrs. Carter walked outside with a small basket. Inside were fresh cookies and a handwritten note. She crossed the street again. Marcus was trimming a small tree near the sidewalk. He looked up as she approached. "I saw what you did this morning," she said quietly. "That was very kind." Marcus shrugged slightly. "Just helping." She handed him the basket. "I can't erase what happened," she said. "But I don't want that to be the only story." He looked at her carefully. "What story?" he asked. "The story of who you are," she replied. There was a long pause. Then Marcus nodded slowly. "I don't want that to be the story either," he said. For the first time, there was no tension in the air. Just honesty. That evening, Mrs. Carter sat on her porch instead of hiding behind her curtains. When neighbors walked by, she spoke openly. "He's a veteran," she told one of them, "and a good man." She did not hide her mistake anymore. She owned it. And the more she spoke, the lighter she felt. Across the street, Marcus noticed something different too. People were waving now, not staring. A small change, but real. As the sun began to set again over Maple Street, Mrs. Carter looked at the sky and whispered something to herself. "A memory can hurt," she said softly, "but it can also teach." And she knew she would never forget that flashing night. Not because of shame, but because it changed her. And sometimes,